Okay, so this is to wrap up the QuickBooks Desktop importing training. So one of the most important things that you'll do before you finish the import is to reconcile the transactions that you imported. It's easiest to do this at the same time. That way, if something does go wrong, then you can fix it right away. Especially with the import, it's really important to reconcile. So make sure that you don't forget this step. It's under the same area as the register. In QuickBooks Desktop, you're going to go into Banking, Reconcile, and we're just in a sample file. We just imported some transactions here, and so this reconciliation won't work, but I just want to show you the steps. So you'll just make sure you pick the right account, whether you have a bank account or a credit card. You'll select whichever one it is, and then the statement date, end date on the statement. A lot of times people put in the wrong date because the payment date on a credit card statement is usually a lot bigger and easier to find than the statement end date. They're usually about a month apart, 3 to 4 weeks. So just make sure that you pick the end of the date range for the statement. And it will either say from this date to this date, or it will say statement end date. So I'm going to just change this back to 2020. And since we're not really reconciling a real statement, I'm going to put 0, but you would just pull that from the statement that you're working on. Now, just like in QuickBooks Online, we don't add our service charges here or the interest earned here. We enter that right on the register. The reason for that is if in some situations, reconciliations have to be undone and redone if certain issues are found. So if we have to undo a reconciliation, it will remove and delete these, and it takes a lot more time to re-reconcile something when you've got to go back month by month and put these numbers in, where if they're on the register, you could probably just reconcile like a 6 or 12 month period at once and move on. So it makes the cleanup or fixing process a lot easier, so we don't use these features. If for some reason you need to undo the last reconciliation, you can do it here. Be cautious and maybe just always check with me or like an accountant or supervisor before you undo a reconciliation. If you do have discrepancies in the beginning balance, so if this number is not right from what your statement shows, this is what locate discrepancies is for. It's going to show you things that have been deleted since it's been reconciled, or amounts that have been changed, or transactions that have been relocated to a different account. So if this number doesn't match, then you're going to go to locate discrepancies. Now that warning that came up is a feature in QuickBooks that can warn you if you're adding transactions that are more than 90 days in the past or more than 30 days in the future, I think. It's just to make sure that it's like a help to make sure that you're always entering things in the right period. Sometimes, like in the first quarter, it's easy for people to continue to enter things in 2020 instead of 2021, or they're entering in the wrong year ahead, so they might accidentally type in 2022. So then when you go to reconcile, you're like, where are these transactions? And they're totally in QuickBooks, they're just in the future. So that's what that is. We can actually turn it off, but a lot of clients like it, the ones that are actually using QuickBooks. The QuickBooks you'll be reconciling, though, if it's in desktop, we are the only ones that touch it. So that makes the reconciliation process a lot easier. So once you get in here, there are 2 things you need to do. We're going to hide all transaction after the statement's end date. So if it's occurred after the statement, it's not going to be on the statement that we're working on. So we want to hide everything that's in a future period, and then we're going to mark all. And because we're importing everything from the bank, this should come to 0. QuickBooks Online is a little different because clients are actually working actively in the QuickBooks sometimes, so there may be some differences there. But because we've had an import, if this is off, it's because of us. So it could be that, like I said, something's been put in the wrong period, if you had to enter something by hand, or if deposits were accidentally imported as payments or vice versa. Then you would need to go in and figure out, like, why are these in the wrong spot? So it's usually not a matter of unchecking things, although you might be able to determine by sorting by amount if there are some duplicate values. Then you could say, oh, that's weird, I have 2 for this exact same random amount. And you could look into that before you just start deleting things. Same with the checks. You could probably check to see if there are duplicate values, but typically because of an import, it's something different, unless a period's been overlapped or something. A lot of times it has to do with multiple accounts. So one thing I failed to mention on the importing is that when you are importing from multiple accounts, there are some processes that you need to take, or some steps you need to take for transferring money. So, for example, if I'm importing the credit card and there are payments to or if I'm importing the checking account and there are payments to the credit card in there, I'm going to import all the transactions in the checking account. But when I go to do the credit card, I have to recognize that the payments to that card are already in QuickBooks. And it doesn't work the same as QuickBooks Online because we can't match something that's already in QuickBooks. Just like in QuickBooks Online, it has to come out to the banking center, which is kind of a holding area, in order for us to match them and then put them back in QuickBooks. But if you're just putting it right on the register, there's no way to really like match or link those because they're already there. So what you have to do is when you get ready to import the credit card, you have to recognize what transactions on the credit card have already been imported because of the previous accounts I've already imported. For example, the checking account. So you would say, oh, it's the payments from that checking account. Now, if there have been payments from multiple checking accounts, it gets a little complicated because you probably want to sort through and figure out which of those have come from that checking account and which ones have come from others. Have you imported those accounts yet? So the simplest way to describe it is which of these transactions have already been imported from the previous accounts that I put in, and then you'll remove those. And then the same thing would happen on the next account. So if I'm importing my third account and it's a savings account, I'm going to want to look through that first and say, are there any transactions on here that have already been imported by the credit card or the checking account? And then I would go through and say, oh yeah, here's a payment to the credit card. I need to remove that because I probably already imported it on the checking or on the credit card. Or if there are transfers to and from the checking account, then those would have already been taken care of. And you can verify, but that's how it should work, is that you should remove transactions as you move down the hierarchy of importing accounts. So that makes it really simple and straightforward. But a lot of times if you do have differences, it could be because something was imported that shouldn't have been because it was already imported before. Like here we've got 2, these, I mean, they're in different months, so they're probably not duplicates, but you could kind of see like, oh, you know, these are the exact same amount on the exact same day, so maybe I should look into whether or not that's a duplicate or a transfer that I should have removed from the second side, if that makes sense. So essentially, you're going to hide transactions after the statement's end date, and then you're going to mark all. And then down here at the bottom, you'll see these top 2 will always be 0. Your ending balance will have a value there, whatever the statement said. And then your cleared balance is going to be whatever QuickBooks calculates. And then the difference should be 0. This is the summary area. So if you want to compare this to your statement, if you're off, you could see where you're off on deposits or checks and payments. So that's where this is. And if you accidentally, and then here's the period that you're working on. I typed in November 30th of 2020. If you need to verify the data you put in, you can click here, modify, and it takes you back to that screen. So I could say, oh shoot, I really should be in a different year, or in a different month or something, or I'm in the wrong account, or this is where you can make changes and then you would continue. And then it would either start it over or whatever, and then I would make sure that my box is checked and mark all. And then hopefully my difference is 0. So if you get to the point where you've done these few things and it's not reconciling, you'll want to look into either duplications or comparing your statement here, and then if you can't figure it out, you can definitely ask for help. But that is reconciling in QuickBooks Desktop. And that's really it. I'm just going to show you one more thing. After we do reconciliations, we always review the profit and loss. It's a very good practice for understanding how numbers come together in the reporting aspect of what we do. There's not a lot of variability here because this isn't the right account. This is, again, Larry's Landscaping. Maybe let's try and do a different year. Oops. Let's see if Larry's got transactions in here. There we go. Okay, so when you run a report in QuickBooks, you can go to Reports, Company Financial, there's the Profit and Loss Standard, and there's the Balance Sheet Standard. Some of the other ones that we look at year end are the General Ledger, and yeah, that's really the most important stuff. If you want to look at the account listing, that's the chart of accounts. We use that one as well. But if you wanted to kind of scroll through here, we want to make sure that none of our income accounts are negative, unless it's a discount or returns, then that makes sense. It should be negative, not positive. And none of our expenses are negative. If they are, it basically means that we received more money on that expense than we got. So it usually indicates that something needs to be fixed. But basically, on the reporting, if you have a question about something or you're like, that looks weird, I don't remember putting anything to that account, you can double click with the magnifying glass and it's going to open up the list of all the transactions that are in there. And you can do it again on the line item and it's going to open the transaction here to show more information. Escape on your keyboard will exit whatever window you're on and it will take you back to the report. So what we do is we just review and make sure that everything here is looking good, that nothing is out of place, there's no duplicate accounts. Trying to think if there's anything else. Negatives, duplicates. Yeah, that's basically it. Just make sure that it looks nice and tidy. Everything, if you've added a new account, make sure that everything is capitalized and organized. If they're using account numbers, make sure that every account has a number and that it flows like it should. And then for that particular client, if you're finished and there's no other work that needs to be done, you can save as a PDF and put this in the reports folder under the appropriate period. So that is basically the finishing steps of QuickBooks Desktop. So there you go.